Hey there, Paul Gray welcoming you back to Convertible Conversations. This week we're talking about a term that I coined, I guess, last week called the hellish darkness. And we've talked about how when something bad happens to us, we can take an offense and we can spiral down into that hellish darkness where we let our imagination run wild and we catastrophize. We think and believe the worst. We keep going one level of worseness down. And then we can even start fantasizing how we're going to hurt the other person or the other group of people who put us in this position that we're imagining that hasn't even happened. Now think about this. When you go into the tunnel of the hellish darkness, who's in that tunnel with you? Well, Jesus, of course. He's with you everywhere you go. And so is the Father and the Holy Spirit. The three are always together because they're one, and they're one with you. Our problem is when we catastrophize and go down into the hellish tunnel of darkness, we forget about Jesus. We don't think about him. We don't include him. When we think, oh man, I'm going to lose my job, we don't think about Jesus being there and helping us and working all the things out for the good. We don't think about him. If we did, we wouldn't go into the tunnel of the hellish darkness. But when we do go to him and we let him speak to us, he'll remind us right away, hey, where you are is not real. See, God lives in the real. Jesus lives in the real with us. He doesn't live in the imagination of what might be. So he will remind us, and he says this to me often, Paul, this is not real. This is not happening. Don't go there. It's a dream or a fantasy or an imagination. His light literally illuminates the darkness and shows us that the darkness we're in is not real. Darkness isn't real. It's the absence of light. You can see a shadow behind me on the wall here, but the shadow's not real. It's just a picture of, not a very good picture of what is real. All right. 1 John 1:5, John says this is the message that we've heard from Jesus and that we declare to you. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. There's no darkness in God. So when we're in the hellish darkness, God's not involved in that. He's with us, but he's not involved in that. That darkness is just imagined. It's not real. Jesus is the light of the world. He's the light that illuminates everything to us. He shows us what's real. In John 1, chapter 1, verse 9, John says, Jesus was the true light who came in the world to give light to every person in the world. And he does. Jesus gives light to everyone. When John wrote that in about the year 90 AD, the church, the people in the church knew that Christ was in everyone, Jews and Gentiles, but most of the Jews and the Gentiles didn't yet know that. And the same is true today. Some Christians know that Christ is in them, but actually many Christians don't. And surely the rest of the world doesn't know that. But Christ is actually in everyone, continually revealing light to them. So here's the deal. I think with many, if not most people, we sometimes like the darkness because it's there in the hellish darkness where our mind plays out how badly we've been hurt. And sometimes we like being the victim because then it's somebody else's fault and we don't have to take responsibility for our actions. And then we kind of like sometimes going thinking, catastrophizing, fantasizing about how we're going to hurt the other person or the other group. And we get a sadistic pleasure out of that. We like fantasizing about how we're going to make them pay and we're going to take vengeance on them. We're going to get revenge. Now, we don't actually commit those dark deeds, but they're very real in our mind, and we get a little pleasure out of that. Of course, we know after a bit that what we're thinking is not good, and then we start to get feeling condemned. Our own thoughts condemn us. And if we stay there long enough and imagine hurting the other person long enough, we can even act out on those revengeful thoughts. And that's when there are mass murders or, somebody getting upset with a neighbor or a relative and attacking them or things like that. Now, tomorrow we're going to learn some more about the hellish darkness and about how God helps us in that in every situation. Paul Gray saying thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.